This is Stare Down the Bull. I'm your host, Susan Hunt. Around here, we tackle the hard stuff: how to lead with clarity, leveraging AI, and turn strategy into real results. My guest today brings a powerful perspective on how to do exactly that. Let's dive in. Today on Stare Down the Bull, I'm joined by Tim Walsh. Tim isn't just a technology leader. He's someone I've had the privilege of working alongside for years. Tim has worked with me at Nuance Live Person and ASAP. And before all of that, when he was at Wildfire, he was actually my customer and my very first multi-million-dollar deal. So this conversation isn't just about technology. It's about trust, growth, risk-taking, and watching an industry evolve from early automation experiments to today's AI-driven customer experience revolution. Tim has had a front row seat and often the steering wheel through multiple waves of transformation. And because we've been in the trenches together, I can ask him some questions only someone who has lived that journey with him can ask. So let's dive in. Welcome to the show, Tim. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Susan. I'm pleased to be here.
Oh, great. So you've had a front row seat with IBM, Nuance, Live Person, Wildfire, and now Sprinkler you're at. Be honest, which of these eras of tech was the wildest ride and why?
Say there were a bunch, but the biggest one was obviously voice recognition and Nuance, right? Prior to Nuance, I was at a company that Nuance ended up acquiring. And voice recognition, as you remember, was always going to be, this is the year, right? This is the year for voice recognition.
Yes.
This is the year for voice recognition. And, we kept thinking it was coming. And finally, when it did come, it really did change the world, I think. The way that people input information into systems, the way that systems understood. And now, I would like to argue that natural language processing or natural language understanding was the predecessor to what we're doing with things like agentic AI, right? Being able to converse, if you will, with systems in a conversational way is something that I think has revolutionized the way that people utilize different customer-facing applications.
I mean, back 25 years ago when you were at Wildfire, Wildfire had this crazy concept of how AI will be used and should be used. It was so far ahead of its time. Can you tell us a little bit about working there and what Wildfire was actually about? Because it's so relevant to today that they had that vision that long ago.
It really was something that was quite groundbreaking. The one thing that was really interesting about Wildfire was its interface, right? The way that it was able to act as an assistant. It was pitched as a virtual assistant. And what it would do was it would allow you to utilize it like you would use someone who's making calls for you, screening calls for you, reading your messages to you, things like that. I think, it was something that the world wasn't necessarily ready for, because what it did was it allowed you to be interrupted. Oh, I have a call from Susan Hunt. Would you like to take it? Well, yes, I would. Or would you like to take a message? Yes, send it to a message. Only let my important calls through. Those kinds of things were, different at the time. And I think it was something that's a predecessor or precursor to all the things that we're seeing today with regard to the technology that's come out. One of the things that held Wildfire back was technology, actually. We tied up 2 trunks at the phone company. That's expensive. And nowadays, of course, you don't have to do those kinds of things. But back then, it was really expensive, and it was difficult for the phone companies themselves who offered the service to embrace and be able to monetize in a way that was meaningful for them. So, as an application was concerned, as natural language was concerned, and the things that we're seeing today with regard to conversational flows, it was ahead of its time, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, it really was ahead of its time. It was really, and their marketing was really impressive. I think they went on to sell to Orange, right? Is that who they
They
sold to?
did. So Orange ended up buying Wildfire, and then France Telecom ended up buying Orange. So Wildfire
Right.
was put into France Telecom R&D, which was US, which was headquartered in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it was kind of mothballed, to be honest. The other thing that started happening was Apple came out with the iPhone, right? And things
Right.
changed significantly with that and Android. So you had a lot of the features that Wildfire was offering embedded into your phone. And today, your voicemail, it does screening for you with the iPhone and all of that. So it does a lot of the things that Wildfire did at the time. It just does it much more efficiently now because technology has really caught up.
I would argue that Wildfire's vision actually really influenced all of the people that invented this stuff at, Alexa, Siri, the people at Apple. I mean, they all saw that concept way back when and then figured out how to put it into practice. A whole bunch of different technologists worked to put that into practice. So it definitely influenced where we are today.
I think you're right, and I think the other thing that it did is it helped cement the importance of persona, right? Everybody
Yes.
who had used Wildfire knew who she was, and they referred to her as she, and all of that,
Yes.
and it was very conversational, and the things that she could do were at the time very different than what you were seeing of other types of applications, even things like voice activated voicemail. Right. I mean, yeah, save, delete, play. It was that
Yeah.
kind of a thing. And it was, even though technology at the time was really interesting, being able to say, hey, Wildfire, play my messages, only play my messages from Susan Hunt. Those are kinds of things today that we take for granted. But back then, it was kind of groundbreaking. And the technology that we were utilizing at the time really did set the stage, I think, for what we're seeing today, as you suggest, with things like Alexa and all of that.
I would totally agree. What's one prediction you were absolutely convinced of over the years at any point that turned out to be totally wrong? Yeah.
I think it's funny because I thought a lot about this when you and I were talking last time, and I thought, what am I going to say that I was totally wrong about? I thought, incorrectly so, when I was at IBM, and I'll admit, granted, this was in the 80s, and I was a mainframe person, which was odd for someone, in their early 20s to be selling mainframes. That was usually a data center kind of thing. But
Yeah.
that being said, I really, really thought that and there still is a place for mainframe computing, obviously. The things that they're doing today with terabytes of storage and processing all the stuff that NVIDIA is doing and all the chips and all that kind of stuff. They need big horsepower to do those kinds of things. I just didn't know that it would become a back end process, so to speak, or a back end utilization technology and the
Yeah.
front end distributed processing. And again, this is in the 80s and I was very young, but um, the front end distributed processing would become so prevalent, right? I just didn't. There'd always be a way for personal computers and all that kind of stuff. But the way that it is today with regard to how things are distributed, I mean, look at things like uh, the crypto stuff that's going on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's all just distributed computing all over the place, and it's just really re-architected, if you way the the way that things can be built. And I just didn't think that that was going to be the case. I don't know what kind of hole I was in, but I didn't think that. Now, the one thing on the opposite end that I was pretty sure would end up happening and did was voice recognition. And that was because I was very biased, obviously. And, my first job in voice recognition was in 1992 when we did voice activated dialing for
Oh,
Rogers. Yeah, at
wow.
IBM. Yeah, when I was at IBM, I was part of the VIA Voice team. And that's how I got into Intervoice, which did the voice activated applications for Rogers and AT&T Wireless at the time and all of those kinds of things. But I was certain that the interface, right, would be interesting, especially with the client set that I was dealing with, which was mobile carriers, right? Mobile carriers and voice recognition just kind of went hand in hand. And I was
Yes.
certain that it was going to take off. It took a little longer than I thought, but it did end up happening. And now, it's almost archaic, if you will, to utilize a touchpad on a phone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, mine is even worse than yours. I thought back in when I was working at Motorola, and my first job out of school was at Motorola in Schaumburg, Illinois, and I was selling cell phones, the very first ones coming out, and I thought it was a job that would last like a year, or maybe 2 years, because how many rich people are there?
Yeah,
Is the way I saw
right.
cellular phone distribution. It's like idiotic,
I
but
hear
that's
you.
what I believed. I was like, "There's only so many rich people, so we're gonna go through them in no time. I'm gonna have to find a new job in a couple of years." I think that's really funny today, considering, how much has been sold. So, automation started as kind of a let's cut costs sort of thing telecoms, for example, banks couldn't keep up with the flow. Airlines couldn't keep up with what they call is it EROCs,
Yep.
IROCs,
Iraq.
IROPS, interruptions,
Yep.
with no advanced warning like weather. So it started as a way to cut costs, get rid of headcount, etc. Now it's less. Let's transform the customer experience. I feel like a little bit more. When did that flip happen? And who do you think deserves credit for that?
Well, selfishly, I think Nuance deserves a lot of credit for that. And I think the reason is because remember when they used to publish those lists that would say, here's when you're calling XYZ company, press 9 and you'll get to an operator, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
Yeah. Yeah.
those were all published, right? And I think that companies like Nuance saw the fact that we need to look at the customer experience and we really need to alter it because people are bypassing the automation in order to try to get their questions answered. And that's not the reason that all this technology was put in place, right? If you could combine saving cost with first call resolution and being able to satisfy the customer's inquiry without having to speak to an agent or at least limiting. Remember when we did that deal for the cruise lines and they were like, oh no, we have to talk to somebody in order to book it, right? We can't have automation do that from a voice recognition
Right.
standpoint.
Right.
And we were like,
Yeah.
fine, get it, but let's do what we'll call triage, right? We'll do all the collection. We'll do all the stuff, where you want to go, what time of year you want to go, how many people are there, what's the area that you want to be in, all that kind of stuff. And then we'll pass it to the agent and we can do it in a conversational way, but we can limit the amount of time that the agent is on the call from, I don't remember what the numbers were, but 27 minutes down to 7 minutes, right? And then, oh, by
Yeah.
the way,
Yes.
post call wrap up can be done the same way. Do you want to book an excursion? Do you want to have the fine dining or the alcohol package or blah, blah, blah? All that kind of stuff you could actually do with a conversational flow on the back end and on the front end while still maintaining your whole the company's desire, if you will, to have an agent book it because they're afraid, right, wrong, or indifferent, that the people are going to hang up. Now, I know that things have changed now. People are more likely to interface with an application, assuming that it's treating them right and it's understanding
Yeah.
what they're saying. You remember back in the day when you'd get all the operator, I'm sorry, did you say X? And people would get frustrated, right? And they'd get unhappy with being able to do it. I think even if you can acknowledge that the system understood what you said, regardless as to whether or not the system can actually complete the transaction, is good, right? It's like, I think you said this. I can't help you with that, but I can pass this on to a person who can, right? That really helps. So being able to add the whole customer experience or improve the customer experience in conjunction with the reduction in cost, I think is the winner winner chicken dinner. And we kind of lived that, if you will, at many of the organizations that we were at. If we could do self-service in a conversational way and a way that customers interfaced with in a non-negative way, it was a win.
Yeah. I do credit Nuance. I also credit, I think the telcos really stepped up and tried to make this a customer experience because they got so much grief for how bad the customer experience was I mean, the I'm not going to say names, but the cable companies were extremely poorly viewed in the way that they handle customer success. And that gave opportunities for like Verizon to step up and say, hey, you know what? Let's have better CX. Let's see if we could take customers that way because they had to create kind of a new way of engaging customers because they were losing, they were bleeding landline customers right and left for 20 years, right? So they used that as a way to, kind of solve a lot of problems that were giving all of them very bad reputations. So
Exactly. I think
I'm
you're
glad I'm
absolutely
glad we
right.
were able to help them with that. Yeah. And I
And
know,
and
it wasn't really about displacement of people. It was about the fact that they just couldn't. And if COVID showed us anything, it's that they could not, like scale up human beings fast enough. It wasn't even possible. So automation had to come in and it had to be good because it had to actually accomplish something for the customer, not
it
just
had to work.
slam
It
it.
had to be able to
Yeah.
solve your problem. And now we're kind of at the point where, okay, that's table stakes, right? It should be
Yes.
conversational. I should be able to do all that. The thing that I think now that's interesting that we're starting to see is, and I hate to use this word, but it's the only word that describes it, the ethical component.
Yeah. No, it's
You remember
important.
we had one customer, you and I at Live Person, who wanted to do a claims application, right? And they wanted to be conversational. They were saying all the right things. And we got in this workshop and we're creating this flow. And this is all via chat, right? But we're using natural language processing in order to facilitate this. And we're doing all these flow analysis and what do we need to ask for? And so someone stood up in the meeting and said, wait a minute, we're doing a claim submission at the very beginning, and we haven't, if the person is standing by the side of the road, they may not be, but if they're standing by the side of the road, shouldn't we ask if we should call the police or ambulance? Is everybody okay? Was anybody hurt? That kind of a thing. Granted, hopefully people have done that before trying to put in their claim, but it's like when you call the doctor's office, it says, if this is an emergency, hang up and dial 911. It's the same kind of thing. Hey, hopefully everyone's okay. If you need to call the police or whatever, let's do that before we get your claim going. But, that's just a poor example, perhaps, of how you should think about those kinds of things when creating these types of applications, because the way that people are treated is going to dictate whether or not they want to stay with you. Here at Sprinkler, that's one of the things that we have all over the place. People remember how you made them feel, right? And I think it's
Yes,
true. I really
it
do
is
think it's
true.
true, because if I had a bad experience and I felt that I wasn't necessarily respected as a consumer and or a person that had an issue, regardless as to whether or not it's real or important, is important. For the long term sustainability of me as a customer with that company. So.
It's wild, and this may be the Mucinex speaking. As you know, I have a little cold. What's wild is that that became table stakes just because one person stood up in a meeting at some point and said, "Hey, maybe we should ask this question." And there are a lot of things in speech applications like that. Kind of like really a lot of it was discovered through, just trial and error, honestly. And, now if you're doing any kind of claim, you're going to get that question right off the bat. Sometimes it's to the point where it's annoying, but it is incredible that was it this big genius scheme that we all sat down and thought about while we were creating this stuff? It's just some
It's
guy
so
at some
true,
insurance company saying,
right?
hey, maybe we should ask this.
There's another example that I absolutely love. You and I worked for a CEO that uh was passionate about that, right? The whole being considerate, if you will, of what the individual's doing. There was a story that he used to tell where somebody called into the bank. They were trying to get gas, and their card wouldn't work, so they called in, and the person who answered the call was like, you know, everything should be working. I don't know. You must have a bad card or whatever the case is. And he was going to the hospital. I don't know if the wife was having a baby or something. I don't remember what the exact thing was, but it was kind of important that he got gas in the car to get going. And the rep left. She was close. So she left the call center and gave him money. What did that say to me? It said to me that every time I'm talking to a bank and somebody calls and say, I've lost my ATM card, you should say, should we Venmo you money? Do you need it right now? Is there a PayPal, that I should send some money to so that, or Western Union or whatever they do these days, that we can
Definitely not
actually,
Western Union,
yeah,
Tim.
that's
It's
probably
not
good.
it's not
But
the Wild West. It's not the 1800s.
the Wells Fargo wagon will be along any minute now.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, the wagon.
so, it's like, I think that's so cool, right? That because now when I'm talking to banks, I'm always saying that I say, I lost my ATM card. Oh, well, we can automate that. I'm like, that's great, but you should probably ask the question: do you need money right now? Because I can sell it to you, or whatever the case may be. Um,
Yeah.
and
Are
that's
they actually doing that? Are they
some
actually
are,
doing that?
yeah, some
Oh,
are.
interesting.
Um,
Hmm,
especially those who are not brick and mortar banks, right? They're really trying to take the bull by the horns and do that kind of stuff. Pun
right.
intended. So things like, I don't want to mention any names, but there are lots of internet based financial institutions that are looking to do things like that because it is something that the new generations who are banking with those types of people want and need and require.
Yeah. I do think generationally the technology is really far like we are along the road far enough now where, the older generation that really was part of the pushback when we were selling this stuff is, I don't want to say gone, but they are kind of gone for the most part. And everybody that's coming up is much more adept at using this kind of technology. I mean, my 4-year-old granddaughter could use any technology that I handed her right now with no explanation, honestly. So I think we've kind of moved beyond the point where it's not acceptable because the technology component and into more of a you need to have this because I never want to talk to people component. I mean, I've been that way for a long time, but I'm sure it's heavily influenced by the technology that I've been working with. But I would say most everybody is in that spot right now. Let's shift gears a little bit. Today, you're leading sales at Sprinkler, a component of sales at Sprinkler. You're helping enterprises run CX across every platform imaginable. What's the most common sentence that you hear from executives that make you think, oh boy, we've got some work to do here? We've all had that experience with a customer. So, what are you hearing these days that feels problematic or like you really have a lot of work, long way to go?
I think, and I hate that it's true, but it's the implementation of AI, right? That seems to be the biggest issue that a lot of people have, because I think it's a matter of business users don't necessarily understand the importance and or what AI can do for them. And
Yeah.
they're swayed, I think, a little bit by, the media that says, oh, AI can be dangerous, AI can take your jobs, AI, all that kind of thing. And I think they get nervous because they don't really understand it. But I think that's true of any new kind of technology that comes about. People always have a concern or a hesitancy to embrace it fully when it first comes out. And not that this is first, new. It's been around for a while. In fact, at IBM, we called it knowledge-based systems with machine learning, which of course became Watson and all that kind of thing. It's been around for a long time. It's just that it's now being utilized in a very different way, and it actually is quite helpful in a lot of aspects. But I think because people don't necessarily fully understand what it can do for them, and there's a bit of hesitancy to embrace the technology, that they're having issues putting it in. I think that's the biggest one that I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, I hear this pretty much on every single podcast that I do, whether it's customer facing or otherwise. I think there's a lot coming at these executives right now from an AI perspective, and it's really hard to sort through what the smart steps are
Yeah.
to move forward. And I don't really talk to a lot of people that have like a really clear idea of a roadmap for AI. And it doesn't matter if you're creating AI as an engineer, you're an executive in a major Fortune 100 company, you're selling AI. I haven't heard anyone say, listen, this is the obvious roadmap that Citibank should deploy in AI. Like it is literally up for grabs. Talk about the Wild West. It literally is the Wild West in AI right now. So it's almost like you have to pick one that's going to really do some sort of impact without completely destabilizing one of your environments, you know? And I think you
It's a
do that with
tool.
trusted sources.
Exactly. It's a tool, right? AI is a tool,
Yeah.
and used correctly, it can be extremely beneficial. But just like any tool, if it's not used correctly, then it's not going to be beneficial. It could even be harmful, so to speak. The thing that I usually use to illustrate how good it can be is agent assist, right? For the different agents.
Yes.
How many times there's an episode of Friends, I hate to do this, but,
Oh, that's
Phoebe
okay.
Phoebe gets a, temp job being selling toner, right? And the woman tells her, "Okay, everything" toner, right? "Everything you need to know is in this book. So no matter what the person tells you, it's in this book. You'll be able to find it," right? And, I think of that every time I think of an agent, somebody asking a question. It's like, I don't know, I need to look through the book and find out what the answer is. Agent Assist is so great because that goes away. Whatever it was, whether it was a binder you were looking at or whether you had to go to different screens and look at stuff, it understands cognitively what it was that the individual was asking for, and it brings up help articles, right? Here's
Yes.
all the stuff. It's not doing it for them. It's helping them. It's assisting them with answering the question, so to speak. And I think that that's the best way to kind of show how it can be utilized in a way that's extremely helpful and functional. But again, it's a tool, and it just needs to be looked at that way. Used correctly, it can be extremely beneficial.
Yeah. I totally agree. Um, what do you think is the most overhyped AI pitch that you've seen recently?
I think the thing that people believe, which I don't necessarily think is true, is that it's going to do everything in an automated way and humans aren't going to necessarily need to be involved in trying to get it done. You and I were involved in a project for an airline many years ago that actually was afraid that we were tracking keystrokes that the agents were doing, and we were just going to create automated flows to answer questions based on the keystrokes that the individuals did, right? Now, granted, that could be done, but it wouldn't be implemented unless somebody wanted to implement it. You would think that someone would have the oversight or the foresight to look at that, right? Yes, this is correct. Yes, this is correct. A good example is my points, if you will, for my frequent flyer stuff. If I call in and I ask the agent, what's my current balance on my frequent flyer? They look it up in system B, they tell me, and it goes from there. All of that is very easily captured in an automated way. What isn't easy to do is compile that, write code against that. Well, I shouldn't say it's not easy, but put it into production. That has to take
Yeah.
some type of oversight from people in order to say, yes, this is something we want to do. And we haven't even talked about business rules yet, right? I mean,
Yeah.
your company, I want to cancel my subscription. Red flag, send it to an agent every single time. I haven't heard one company ever say to me, oh, that's okay. Yeah, we can automate that process, right? They just don't want to do that. So taking those two things into account, I think is really important.
So you think the overhyped thing is companies thinking that AI will just automatically take over something if they implement it in a
Yeah,
smaller way, which is ridiculous. I mean, one of the things that I talk to my younger AI CEOs about a lot is how complex these systems are and how they're dinosaurs. The systems are dinosaurs in these big companies, and it is very complex to deploy anything meaningful, whether your tech is great or not, because it's not a top level thing. Like if you want to do balances, you have to hook into all of their billing processes, and the list goes on and on and on. So I agree that is really overpriced. That it's going to like worm its way in and take over the entire company. I mean, that would be amazing if it could do that, but it's also, the technology may be really hot and new, but the systems that they're functioning with are not.
right.
They're just not.
Exactly.
So this is going to be one of those things that we're going to go back in 10 years and go, oh my God, remember how stupid we were when we said this? This is like, there's only so many rich people that can afford cell phones. Mark my words. We just made the dumbest prediction ever. That's
That's
all
too
right.
funny.
That's all right. I don't mind. So the show's name is Stare Down the Bowl, as you
Yep.
know. So
Yep.
I always like to ask everybody that's on the show, what the moment when the real pressure, revenue's tight, the market's skeptical, the boards are circulating. What's the biggest bull moment that you've had that you had to change or pivot or hang on for dear life for a deal? What is your stare down the bull moment?
Yeah, it had to do with technology. It also had to do with the world changing, and our company wasn't. And it was when we were at Nuance and we were dealing with a telco, and we had a product called voice activated voicemail, if you remember what that was.
Yeah,
Well, now everybody
yeah,
has it, right? It's comes with and all that kind of thing. And that's what was happening back then, right? The actual providers, if you will, were bypassing the whole network-based voicemail system and actually inputting their own interface on top of it. So, but we were trying to sell this product that would go on top of the voicemail systems so that people could say skip, delete, save, whatever, and all those kinds of things. And play my messages, right? And read them out to me as I'm driving my car. Um, Other companies were coming up with that and actually giving it to the carriers. So it was really difficult. And my whole world was based on that because, as you know, we had bought another company that was that's all they did. And
yeah.
I really thought that was what was going to take us, to the to nirvana, so to speak, and it just all fell apart. And I had to switch pretty quickly with regard to my strategies as to how I was going to keep my job and make enough money so that the company was going to be happy. So it was difficult to do that. But that being said, because of all the different interfaces. I moved from an application based scenario, things like voice activated voicemail, voice activated dialing, all those kinds of things, to care, right? Because as you were saying earlier, with regard to the Verizons of the world and all of that, that was really important at the time to automate that stuff, but to make it in a conversational way. And by moving into the care world, it opened up a lot of possibilities for me and my company, and I was able to do it. But it was difficult.
Did we almost miss a quarter because of that, Tim, or
No, no, we made it, luckily. Um,
Oh god, we did make it every quarter, I don't know how.
great.
Today I look back on it and I was like, "How in the world did we ever do that?" But we did. So, final question, and then anything else you wanna add. When we fast forward, I'm gonna say 15 years, when somebody interviews you about this AI era, what will you laugh about saying, "We completely overthought that"?
I think we overthought the thing that I was talking about earlier, in the sense that AI is going to take over everything and humans are going to be obsolete with regard to certain things. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that although technology is going to keep improving, right? I think it's as easy as looking at what we used to do with regard to vocabularies, right? If you had a vocabulary and voice recognition and it was yes, no, right? I want you to say yes, no. I'm directing you from a directed dialogue perspective to say yes or no. But I might want to say affirmative. You betcha. We'll do it. And that was
Yeah.
the vocabulary that we had to create. But it was all human based. What other words mean yes and no? And we can put that into the vocabulary. So if people say those kinds of things, it will still understand from an intent perspective what it was that I was trying to get accomplished. Um, Nowadays, it doesn't have to go that way. If confidence levels are high enough that that AI thinks that yes means affirmative, then it's going to automatically be able to add it in. Whether or not it's implemented, as we were just discussing a minute ago, is a different issue. But that was really expensive to try to figure out how to do that stuff. That and tuning in itself was really, really expensive. That's kind of not the point or the case anymore. It's much more affordable, if you will, to do those rudimentary tasks. And that's where AI really, really helps us out an awful lot. And I think that one of the things we're going to think about 15 years from now is we're going to say, you know, AI can do a lot of stuff for us. And the fact that we were nervous about AI taking over everything is wrong. It's just like everybody saying that voice is dead, right? That no one's going to call a contact center in the next 20 years. Still the biggest part of customer care, right? People are still utilizing the telephone quite a bit. Why is that? Is it because people that are in their 70s don't want to chat? Is it because that's what they're used to? I don't know, but they're still doing it, right? Now, granted, digital stuff's getting up there. And as the younger generations come up, they're going to utilize that more and more. But that being said, people still call. They still do. So there has to be a happy, not medium, but a resolution, if you will, that combines all of it. Channel agnostic. I am, XYZ company, and I'm going to support you in any way you want. You want to come into the store, you want to call us, you want to chat with us, you want to send us an email. We'll be able to handle it.
I think you're right. I mean, we've been hearing this everything's gonna take over for 25 years now. I do think that it'll advance significantly. We'll find better ways to implement it. We'll find better ways to utilize it. Um, and there may be jobs that are eliminated. There will be jobs that are eliminated as a result of AI, but we're ways off on that still. So,
Always been the case, right? Look at the cotton
yeah,
gin, right? Oh, all these people are going to be out of work.
cotton gin.
Well, it's the same thing. They made the same argument, right?
It is true. They make the same argument about everything. They made the same argument about laptops. They made the same argument about cell
Exactly.
phones. They made the
Things
same argument. They
change.
do. They were
And
always trying to eliminate humans.
exactly,
We
but
are
it's always a
trouble. We
balancing.
are trouble.
But then, but then you need people to fix the machines, right? You need people to
Right.
program the machines. So it balances. It all balances out in the end.
Yeah. Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining Stare Down the Bull today. A really fun conversation, really informative. You remind me of deals that I have long forgotten about every time I talk to you. So that's always a good time. And I absolutely wish you the best in the future. And hopefully you come back on the show another time.
You bet. I'd love to. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Stare Down the Ball. If today's conversation sparked new ideas, share it with a colleague and keep the momentum going. The future belongs to leaders who act, so subscribe and join us again next week.